Welcome back to our Pulsion Talks series, where we discuss key topics and trends affecting our industry. I'm joined once again with our founder and owner, John Maguire, and our head of project delivery, Paul McAteer. Today, we are going to look at Agile project management methodology and the impact this has been having on software development, and some of the reasons that people might be struggling with implementing this kind of methodology. We recently commissioned a research survey on this topic, and a large number of respondents came back to us saying that they'd seen a negative impact when trying to implement Agile methodology. A huge 74%, in fact, told us that there had been a negative impact when trying to do this. Were either of you surprised that the number was as high as that? And what do you think would be some of the reasons for that being so high?
I think from my point of view, I think certainly looking at the popularity of Agile, and if you look on IT Jobs Watch, some of the main sites, then Agile is pretty much the number one skill in development that people want. So it's a very, very common thing for people to look at. People generally have problems with the software projects. Anyway, it's not uncommon to have problems with software projects, but it was quite surprising that it was that high, because it's supposed to be a methodology that kind of reduces these problems.
Yeah.
I think as far as what the problems, the reasons for the problems, I think what we've seen, certainly in seen projects that we've looked at, is it's not particularly Agile as such that's the real problem. It's the way people will use Agile, especially I think things like requirements capture, and getting the requirements captured in a sensible way as upfront as you can. Some people just start in projects almost a mandate to start coding, and what happens is they end up just writing some tickets, doing a sprint, doing some coding, and doing a few sprints before they then figure that they have to rework what they've already done in sprint one. And I think what we've seen in some experiences, unless you get the requirements right, unless you really engage with the stakeholders of the application, is Agile can lead you down a road, but you suddenly backtrack on that road and start developing down another road and so forward. It can be a meandering type methodology.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me anecdotally from the connections I see on LinkedIn and various other stories. You see or hear of lots of companies who say, we're going Agile, let's do it, this is great, this is wonderful, this is the panacea for all our ills, and we can do everything that's wonderful. But they misunderstand the reasoning behind it. I mean, the Agile Manifesto was written quite a number of years ago, and at that time it was written for good reasons that I fully understand. But I think people have taken that to be gospel and misinterpreted it, and taken that to an extreme where they don't do any design, they don't do any documentation, they don't do anything in terms of architecture up front, and just as John says, just go at it and back themselves into a corner, which costs time and money. And then they get back out of it again. So the numbers don't surprise me in the slightest, I don't think.
I think as well it's perhaps indicative of the whole industry, the fact that there's such a lot of new people coming into the industry, that you're finding that you've got inexperienced people who are kind of learning doing Agile. It's easy to go on a course, and I don't think sometimes the Agile courses really give you the kind of war-hardened kind of the experience that perhaps myself and Paul had. They paint a kind of rosy picture of, you get some tickets, you do this, but unless you've actually been through a number of projects using it, you don't actually realise that the things that you really have to put in place. I think as being kind of more experienced software developers, say myself and Paul, I think certainly the lack of documentations and things like standards, etc., mean there's this attitude, especially amongst maybe younger software engineers, that we'll do something, but we'll just fix it. It's no problem. And a lot of that fixing takes time. You might be delivering things, but sometimes you're keeping busy reworking things that you've already developed. So we tend to see a lot of rework.
So it's more delivering individual components quicker than the overall project is really the outcome.
Sometimes, and people sometimes use it as an excuse not to document things, not to really think about things up front, and that's kind of wrong. I mean, I think we've certainly discussed it internally. It's not just about making up a few tickets and starting your product development. You really have to think in advance. Otherwise, Paul says, you don't have the architecture, you haven't thought about problems that occur, you don't have standards, you don't have maybe standard look and feel. And we've seen all these problems where somebody picks up one ticket and does something one way, somebody picks up another ticket and does something another way, because there are no documented standards. So I think certainly what we've seen over our years, I'd say, is that there has been a decline in upfront documentation, almost with Agile, to the point where actually I do think it causes problems in projects, because people just don't want to document, they want to get in and code, even with things like user stories and stuff like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things of the Agile Manifesto, is that it's good that it's only, I can't remember, 3 or 4 rules in quotes, because there are no rules. That's the beauty of it, but also that's the downside, is there aren't any rules. It's not a cookbook as such that you can say, do this, do this, do this, and you get to your result. I think that's painful at times.
Okay. So throughout the survey, some kind of common themes that came through on the reasons for that negativity being so high were around predicting timelines and predicting costs of a project and general cost increases throughout the lifetime of the project. So in your experience, have you seen that being the case with this kind of methodology?
Without doubt. I mean, one of the problems, certainly it perhaps applies more to what we do than what other companies do, is that almost everything we do is different in some way, shape or form. Most of our projects are greenfield, and that makes estimating something that you haven't done before, for the most part, difficult. One of the tools that is used in the Agile world for estimating is, if you have something that was done before, you can say, well, it took me X to do that. I know this new version is either twice as hard or twice as easy, whatever we're in, and that gives you a relative value, and it is relative through user stories and story point estimates. They're all relative values. But if you don't have that to start with, and you don't have that baseline, it's really difficult to start. And I think many organisations, when they start that journey, don't have that baseline. So their initial findings almost certainly will be negative from it, because they've moved into a world where it's really difficult to estimate these things.
I think it's also, if you there's almost 2 conflicting kind of paradigms there. There's the estimation, which requires a lot of detail, because if you want to estimate, you kind of better know what you're doing. But at the other side, you've got Agile, which says put the detail in later on down the process. So it's really difficult as a company that writes software for other people on a daily basis. We don't find customers coming along to us and saying it's a kind of unlimited budget, so just I want something that's similar to that. Generally, they have kind of quite loose requirements. They don't have the detail. They've not done the requirements capture themselves, so they're coming along with something fairly fuzzy as to what the requirements are, but they want an estimate of price. And starting off Agile is sometimes quite difficult in terms of that. And it also means, it means sometimes for software developers, you don't have to maybe get that detail up front. Also means for people who are stakeholders who are actually commissioning a project, they're thinking, this is great, we can just put off any decisions until later on. But if you want to do that, you have to really accept that the budget is flexible. And that's the problem sometimes, that people want to know how much something is going to cost before they do it, but you can't tell them how much something is going to cost. You can't do estimation properly unless you have some pretty detailed requirements, and that's where it can go wrong, because people sometimes put rough estimates in, and but then it's Agile, so requirements change as they go along, and it's very, very tough, and that happens obviously with the projects we do, but it also happens with companies that are doing where it's internal project teams, where stakeholders have a deadline for something, but suddenly they find that they miss the deadlines because things are changing too quickly, or there's lots of rework, or there's not enough control over the project.
I think echoing back to the Agile Manifesto, the key element there when it talks about documentation and requirements is, it doesn't say this in those words, but the gist of it is, do just enough that you need to do to get through what you want to do. And I think in many instances people haven't done that. They, as John says, they just go, let's have at it. We'll make the decisions later. There are certain decisions really have to be made up front, whatever they may be. I think that's what's being missed.
Okay. So In spite of the large number saying that there's been a negative impact, one of the other results we got in the survey was that 87% said that the biggest benefit to them in adopting Agile was getting their work completed quicker. But given the opposite of that being that there's such a huge number saying that there's been a negative impact, do you think it's that obviously they've said there's issues around predicting overall timelines, projects are running late and costs are increasing. So on one hand they're saying we're getting things done quicker, but then they've got all these other issues. So do you think that's a part of individual elements of a project are going quick, but the impact being it's not being scoped properly, therefore there's rework, they've not predicted costs, so it's bringing in all these other negative elements.
It's a difficult one because one of the key goals of doing an Agile project is to, probably not the right way to say it, but fail faster. So you know you're going down a wrong road early, so you can at least stop that as soon as you realise it's going there and come back and do something different. So that might be part of the reason why they're saying, you know, we can achieve things quicker because they're getting to where they want to go through the minimum viable product and the development processes.
Because you're not getting to the end of a project before saying that's not what I wanted.
Correct.
You're getting to a part.
Yeah, because if you do the regular show and tells, you can show your stakeholders and your customers, here's where we are, is this what you want? And it is what we try and do as often as we possibly can. We do regular releases to try and get to those stages and stop that disappear for 3-6 months, then turn up with a ta-da moment and say, there you go. Customer says that's great, maybe what I'll ask for, but actually now that I've seen it, it's not what I wanted. And actually, even by doing what we do, we still see that quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I always use the kind of NAF analogies, as I'd call them, where it's almost like building analogies, like, as in, you know, when you're building software, it's an engineering thing, it's like building a house or building a car, but I think the thing is you can, if you set the builders off to build your house without kind of telling them much about what you want, what the purpose of each room is, then they can make some quick progress until you decide actually that the upstairs toilet is going to be on the other side of the house to the downstairs toilet. When they reach that upstairs room, they suddenly say, I wish we'd known this earlier, because what we have to do is we have to take all the waste pipes and move them from one side of the house to the other. And that's the kind of enough analogy, but hopefully for non-technical people it makes sense. That's the kind of thing that can happen in software projects. You haven't thought far enough ahead for this piece of functionality which doesn't really fit very well into what you've already developed. So you're delivering things, and then something comes up which causes you to think about re-architecting the system because maybe you haven't thought deeply enough about how the whole system's going to fit together, and that's a common thing, especially in sort of less experienced teams where they just want to let's just get started. You know, they write some user stories and they have some idea, but even user stories, you know, they can be quite difficult to understand. You really want to do some element of design, break things into actual engineering components, so you know what you've got and base it against your user stories and requirements, etc.
In actual fact, I think it's a pretty good analogy. When we reflect back on what we said a moment ago about doing just enough design up front and just enough planning, if the developers did know, I want a toilet this side and one that side, you don't have to specify what's in it, other than, you know, I need a waste pipe and I need some hot water, I need some cold water. Beyond that, you don't need to say I need a shower, I need a bath, I need a toilet, I need a sink. That's the sort of level of detail that's
the
done later.
infrastructure you need in place at the beginning.
But design and architecture,
but I think what we see on occasion is certainly people doing less than enough up front, and they get into they do a lot of work, but then the projects are late because they're delivering things, but then things have to be reworked, and you get into this rework cycle where things aren't quite as they should be or consistent across the application, or you have to change the architecture because you haven't thought deeply enough up front. I mean, the kind of house building element of things, I always tell a story about, I think it's NASA who built a house in something like 16 or 18 hours back in the 1960s. And it wasn't a house building exercise, it was a project management exercise. People could take 6 months to build the same house, a year to build the same house, but what they did is they thought about everything up front and really project managed everything to a very detailed level so that they could achieve things in a very quick time window, which kind of goes against what we're talking about with Agile, because you'd say, well, why is Agile? Why wouldn't you do an Agile build? Surely an Agile build of a house would be quicker than the project managing everything and then doing it. You know, so I think there's a balance between sensible, upfront thought and preparation for a project versus let's just start. Let's get some code written straight away.
Which I think brings us nicely on to the next point. One of the major reasons for some of the negativity and for some sort of not liking Agile and having issues with it was cited as being an amount of rework that people have got, that they're seeing more and more of it, which kind of leads on from what you were just saying there. So is it one of the positive being, Paul, as you said earlier, that you're doing just enough up front to get started and know what you need, what's needed to be in place.
Yeah.
And you had said that people are doing less than enough.
Yeah.
So it's if they don't get to that just enough
Absolutely.
point, then that's where the issues
And
arise.
the problem is there is no definition of what just enough is, because the Agile process is very flexible. That it doesn't prescribe. It just says do enough that you need to do to move on and define what you're doing in your next time period.
So do you think some of the issues with implementing Agile then are around a lack of understanding of what they should be doing?
I think part of it is that difficulty in saying there is no prescription, there is no cookbook. It's not like Jenny's 30-minute meals where it says do this, and I can follow that. Although it refers back to the preparation thing again. But, there is no thing that people can follow. And I think there's also this, everybody recognises that doing things in a waterfall way doesn't work, or it doesn't work as well as it perhaps could.
Yeah.
And thinking, we can go this Agile's going to be wonderful, it'll get us delivery, it'll get us everything we possibly want, but not actually realising that in reality, it doesn't work like that. Even in the best laid out Agile project, it might still go wrong for various reasons. There's no guarantee of success no matter which model you follow.
Yeah, and there seems to be more of a, I think it depends on the size of the organisation, but standards are quite important as well, the way you develop things, because you can give two developers two pages and they can develop them in completely different ways, and what you or not just completely different ways, but completely different approaches to things like sorting or kind of filtering, let's say, on a list of things. They can do that in different ways because Paul's one developer, I'm another developer. Paul thinks it's a great idea to do it in this way. I think it's a great idea to do it in another way. We haven't chatted to each other properly about how we do it. We implement the pages, and then somebody looks at it, code reviews it, and says, "Oh, somebody's going to have to change because this is not consistent." And that's where you see sometimes, I think, in certainly immature organisations using Agile, they don't have standards. Whereas perhaps when people were doing waterfall, bigger organisations had a lot of standards about how to do things, and people just open up code and just sometimes starting on projects without really thinking about how the whole thing should be put together. It seems anti-Agile to kind of be documenting things up front and to be thinking about it up front, but it's also really foolhardy not to think about it. But you maybe don't have to do it to the level that waterfall has to be, but it really depends where you are. What we try to do is we try to standardise things. So when we go to develop projects, there's frameworks around the standards like UI guidelines, etc., that we can actually put in place to make sure that we do things in a fairly consistent manner, and we're always looking to make things more consistent to try and improve that process. It's like what gets missed in Agile, so we learn the lessons at the end of it and feed it into the next Agile project.
Yeah, I think the just enough question is always a difficult one. And I remember many years ago writing and it was a 500-page pseudocode for a design I was doing. It took me a month. I then started implementing on the Monday morning, and within an hour I knew it was wrong because I'd actually started implementing. And there's a good example, and that's a real life example, not made up, of where that was a complete waste of time. I doing as well hitting it early because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Horses for courses. Is that just enough as opposed to too much?
It's getting that balance right.
Yeah.
Another figure that came up in the report and the survey we did was that 66% of development teams have felt the negative impacts we've mentioned, and state that the results have been less detailed documentation, a lower morale, and a weakening in working relationships among the team. What's your thoughts on that, and what advice would you give to those teams?
Interesting. It reminds me of when I did a product owners course. One of the examples that the trainer gave us was of a large organisation. I can't remember the name of it, but a large organisation. She said she was coaching with them and that she was going around the teams, and at the end of a sprint, a team can say, here's what we've delivered. And there was one team who had delivered in real terms nothing. They had 0 story points to deliver. And she made a point of saying to the management team, this is acceptable. It can happen because not everything can happen when you want it to be. And I think there's a lot of outside view in saying, well, actually, you must do something every week, every 2 weeks, whatever your sprint period is. So the management previously to her coaching them had gone in and basically ripped the team a new one because they hadn't delivered anything. She was trying to reset that. So there's this outside perception that Agile answers all the world's problems and everything will be fantastic. So I'd say certainly from a management point of view, reset that view. It's not going to solve all your problems.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of things like rework and stuff like that, you see if you are doing rework and you're not delivering things, and then suddenly business stakeholders who you're dealing perhaps with non-technical people who perhaps don't understand. If you're working in a really kind of a broken agile way, then there is a lot of friction between business people who are seeing things not getting delivered and the team saying, well, we think we're doing a good job, but they're running around a bit like headless chickens. They're very busy. They're very busy doing rework. They're very busy, kind of coding lots of stuff, but not that is actually something that the business stakeholders particularly see as being productive or worth it. So the lack of documentation, I think we've kind of covered here anyway. I mean, I tend to think sometimes with Agile, when you go, people deliver a system, look for things like user manuals, etc. Sometimes the other analogy I've got is like writing a film script as a series of post-it notes, which is your standard kind of Agile boards, and then at the end of the project, the team go or disband or whatever, and somebody has to come along and read the script from a random set of post-it notes organised by sprint. That's quite difficult to understand what a system does. So you've not got the Bible describing what the system does, unless you actually write the documentation. A lot of people don't write the documentation because Agile is seen as documentation light, and why would you do that? So I think if anything in Agile, you certainly you want to get those requirements as defined as you can, so that the business knows what they're getting. I think it's great. Agile's great because you can show things quickly, but it works best where you kind of know what you're delivering, and you can work through it really quickly, and there are no surprises for the business stakeholders. And that way, you've got a kind of happy team that say, "Wow, we've developed feature after feature." The business stakeholders saying, "This is great. Our product is coming along," and you're also hopefully you've got some sort of sense of documentation that means that for support purposes, for user manuals, for help systems, etc., you've got all that written down.
Okay, that's good. So thanks both for those insights, and as per the last time, we want to encourage feedback during this series, so we'd welcome any comments you've got on any of the points that we've raised today around Agile. What's your experience, negative, positive? Do you agree with any of the points that have been raised today as well? And also keep an eye on our social media accounts, where we'll be releasing some more information and results from the survey that we commissioned. So join us once again the next time, where we'll be looking at kind of history of digital transformation with a focus on artificial intelligence. Thanks, everyone.